The first signs of disaster arrived in the dead of night. Humanity had always been cautious about the stars, always waiting for the next big threat. But even in their wildest fears, they never imagined something like this. The Galactic Empire's fleet had entered Earth's atmosphere without warning, and now it hovered ominously above the planet, like an iron fist ready to fall. General Marcus sat in his command center, his eyes glued to the screens in front of him. The glowing maps showed the alien ships steadily advancing, their colossal forms visible in the sky, casting an eerie shadow over the cities below. Their dreadnoughts, large enough to consume entire cities in one strike, drifted slowly across the blue sky, while their smaller ships maneuvered with precision. The Empire's fleet was ready to strike, ready to wipe out humanity in an instant. They saw Earth as nothing more than a primitive, insignificant planet. Marcus, however, didn't share the same sense of doom. He had faced down impossible odds before. As a young officer, he had fought in countless battles, and his mind had always worked 2 steps ahead of his enemies. His reputation was built on outsmarting opponents who underestimated him and his people. He was their last hope. His fingers flew across the holographic controls, activating the defense network he had spent years preparing. Earth's military wasn't equipped to deal with the Empire's overwhelming power. The Empire had robots with AI precision, cloaking devices that rendered their ships invisible, and massive dreadnoughts capable of wiping out entire continents. Against such power, humanity stood almost no chance. But Marcus wasn't ready to surrender. His mind raced, analyzing every possibility. If the Empire underestimated them, it might be their only advantage. Humanity had something the Empire didn't: the willingness to fight, to sacrifice, to do whatever it took to survive. The first alien ships began breaking through Earth's atmosphere, their sleek designs cutting through the air like knives. The moment they entered Earth's airspace, Marcus's voice rang out, calm and controlled, but with an urgency that carried through the entire command room. Activate the defense grid. Launch the EMP missiles. Now. The room erupted into action. Earth's makeshift military forces scrambled to launch every defense they could muster. They had no cloaking devices, no advanced AI, and no robots with perfect precision. What they did have were their brains, their makeshift weapons, and the raw power of human will. Humanity's first line of defense was a series of EMP bombs, crude but effective against the alien ships. These bombs, built in secret by Earth's top engineers, were designed to send electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disrupt the cloaking devices of the Empire's ships. It was a gamble. No one knew if the bombs would work, but it was all they had. As the bombs launched into the sky, a massive explosion lit up the heavens. The EMP blast tore through the sky, and for a brief moment, the alien ships flickered, as though the very fabric of their technology had been torn apart. For the first time, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. It worked. But just as quickly, that hope was dashed. The aliens' fleet recovered faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within moments, the cloaking devices were reactivated, and the ships were back to full power. The EMP attack had done little more than annoy them. The Galactic Empire was not as vulnerable as they had hoped. The battle was only just beginning. As the first wave of alien fighters descended, a cold silence fell over the command room. Marcus could see the fear in his soldiers' eyes. They were undertrained, under-equipped, and outgunned by a factor of 10. But there was something else in their eyes too: determination. The humans weren't about to give up without a fight. "Hold the line," Marcus commanded. "This is not over yet." The massive dreadnoughts above Earth were just the beginning. From their shadows, smaller ships descended, releasing drones that spread across the battlefield. These robots, each armed with deadly laser weapons, were nearly indestructible. The first wave of drones hit Earth's defenses hard, tearing through military installations with terrifying precision. Marcus's heart raced as he watched cities burn in the distance. But just when it seemed like all was lost, something extraordinary happened. Earth's forces, despite being vastly outmatched, fought back with an intensity the aliens had not anticipated. Though their weapons were primitive compared to the Empire's advanced tech, their soldiers used everything they had to fight. Tanks rumbled across the terrain, missiles fired into the sky, and soldiers on foot engaged in desperate firefights. The human resistance didn't just fight. They adapted. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes for the aliens. Earth's soldiers, despite their lack of high-tech weaponry, had a relentless will to survive. Marcus stood at the center of it all, his eyes constantly scanning the battlefield. The aliens had underestimated humanity before, and now they were starting to realize their mistake. As the first alien dreadnought attempted to attack a major city, Marcus issued orders to launch a counterattack. The humans launched their second wave of EMP missiles, hoping to knock out the alien ship's cloaking devices again. This time, they were more strategic. The missiles hit their targets, causing multiple dreadnoughts to flicker out of sight momentarily. But this time, Marcus didn't wait for the ship's recovery. He ordered his forces to strike immediately, launching a full-scale assault on the disoriented alien ships. For the first time in hours, the humans had gained the upper hand. Alien ships were damaged, and their drones were being destroyed one by one. But Marcus knew it wasn't over. The aliens still had far more ships and technology at their disposal. The battle had only begun, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Marcus knew the stakes. If humanity lost today, Earth would be wiped from the face of the galaxy. But if they could keep fighting, keep resisting, they just might stand a chance. As the alien fleet reassembled, ready to launch their counteroffensive, Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. We're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for the future. We fight because we have no choice. The humans had just made their stand. The Galactic Empire was furious, and they were not about to let a primitive species like humanity defeat them so easily. The real battle was only beginning. The cold void of space stretched out before Zolfar, the supreme commander of the Galactic Empire. He stood on the bridge of the lead dreadnought, watching Earth's pathetic resistance unfold. His sharp, alien eyes gleamed with disdain as he saw humanity's forces attempt to stand against the overwhelming might of the Empire. Such primitive efforts, Zolfar muttered, his voice carrying a tone of mockery. How long do they think they can resist? Their weapons are nothing compared to the might of our empire. The flickering lights of the control room illuminated his green skin, highlighting the harsh features of his face. Zolfar had seen countless civilizations rise and fall before him, and he knew that Earth's defiance was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The Empire's technology was far beyond anything the humans could comprehend. Their massive dreadnoughts, cloaked in near invisibility, would crush Earth's defenses in a matter of hours. But there was something that unsettled Zolfar, a strange feeling that he couldn't shake. Despite the overwhelming power of the Empire, despite the superiority of their robots, drones, and advanced cloaking technology, the humans were still fighting back with an intensity that made no sense. They should have been easy to defeat, yet the Empire's forces were being thwarted at every turn. How are they doing this? Zolfar thought, his frustration growing. These humans should be no match for us. What is happening? His eyes narrowed as he saw another drone explode in the distance, followed by a blast that shook the very hull of his ship. He punched his fist into the armrest of his chair. The Empire's precision robots, equipped with AI capable of making lightning-fast decisions, should have wiped out the human forces within minutes. Yet here they were, still fighting with unimaginable ferocity. The answer to this mystery lay with General Marcus, a man who had seen the human spirit at its finest. Marcus had always been a man of strategy. He knew that Earth had no chance of defeating the Empire with brute force alone. But there was one thing humanity possessed that Zolfar had underestimated: ingenuity. Marcus had anticipated the Empire's every move. While Zolfar and his fleet laughed at humanity's primitive technology, Marcus had prepared his soldiers for an unconventional war. one that the Empire's advanced tech couldn't predict. He had trained them in guerrilla tactics, in the art of surprise, and in using the environment to their advantage. Earth's soldiers may not have had advanced cloaking devices or precision AI drones, but they had something far more dangerous: ingenuity and the willingness to survive at any cost. The humans had learned quickly. They had adapted to the Empire's strategy. Every time an alien ship cloaked itself, humanity didn't panic. They waited, they watched, and they learned. Soon, they had discovered the faint energy signatures that betrayed the cloaking technology, allowing them to track the invisible ships and strike before they had a chance to fire. "Fire the EMP missiles," Marcus barked, his voice calm but filled with purpose. Earth's forces launched another barrage of EMP missiles toward the Empire's dreadnoughts, knowing that the electromagnetic pulses would disrupt the cloaking technology once again. The missiles hit their targets with deadly accuracy. The dreadnoughts, which had once been invisible, flickered back into view, their massive forms now visible to Earth's forces. And just as before, Marcus's soldiers launched their assault, catching the aliens off guard. The robots, which had once been nearly invincible, were now forced to fight in the open, where they were vulnerable to the human soldiers' relentless attacks. "Impossible," Zolthar growled, his eyes widening as another dreadnought fell, its shields failing under the sheer force of humanity's strike. "How can this be happening? They should be dead by now." Zolthar's frustration was palpable. The humans were using tactics he had never encountered. Instead of following conventional military strategies, they fought like animals backed into a corner. They weren't afraid to fight dirty. They didn't hesitate to use their surroundings to their advantage, setting traps and ambushing the Empire's forces. Every move they made seemed to be calculated, every strike carefully planned. And they were winning. Slowly, but surely, the Empire's massive fleet was being reduced in numbers. For every one of their ships that fell, humanity gained a foothold. Zolthar couldn't comprehend it. His ships, his drones, his robots, nothing seemed to be enough to crush these humans. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like survivors, and that was something the Empire had never had to contend with. Meanwhile, General Marcus stood at the center of Earth's forces, watching the tide of the battle slowly shift in humanity's favor. His soldiers were far from perfect, but they were relentless. The Empire might have had advanced tech, but Marcus knew they couldn't predict what humanity was capable of. They had underestimated the human spirit, and now that mistake was coming back to haunt them. "We've got them on the ropes," Marcus said to his commanders. "But we can't stop now. We push forward. We push them back." Earth's soldiers followed his command, determined to turn the tide completely. They fought with everything they had. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon was now part of one massive resistance. The war had become more than a battle for survival. It had become a battle for humanity's future. The alien forces were losing control of the battlefield. Their once precise drones were now falling in droves, unable to match the human fighters' unpredictable attacks. Earth's military, once thought to be obsolete, had become the force that stood between the Empire and total domination. Back on the bridge of the dreadnought, Zolthar was pacing now, his hands clasped behind his back. The images of falling ships haunted him. Every dreadnought lost was a testament to the strength of the humans he had so carelessly dismissed. His pride, once unshakable, was now cracking under the weight of his failures. "How are they doing this?" Zolthar repeated, his voice quieter this time, almost to himself. "How are they managing to defeat us with such primitive weapons?" The truth was simple. The humans were fighting with everything they had, because they had no choice. Zolthar had underestimated them, assuming that Earth's military was as primitive as their technology. He hadn't anticipated the power of human resolve, the strength that came from desperation. And it was that strength that was now tearing apart the might of the Galactic Empire. The humans, with their crude weapons and makeshift tactics, had brought the Empire to the brink of defeat. It was a sight Zolthar could not bear to watch. His empire, once invincible, was being undone by a species he had deemed insignificant. As the battle raged on, the Galactic Empire's supreme commander was forced to confront a terrifying reality. He had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would cost him everything. The battle raged on across Earth's skies, a violent clash between humanity's desperate resistance and the overwhelming might of the Galactic Empire. Zulfar, supreme commander of the Empire, stood tall, watching the chaos unfold on the massive screens of his command center. His mind churned with anger, frustration, and confusion as human forces continued to fight back against what should have been an unstoppable invasion. Despite all his technological advantages, dreadnoughts, cloaking devices, and robots with AI precision, he had failed to crush the humans. But Zulfar was not one to give up easily. He had already lost too many ships, too many drones. The humans had dared to defy the Empire, and now it was time to end their resistance once and for all. Orbital bombardment, Zulfar commanded coldly, his voice sharp like a blade. Burn this planet to ash. The fleet's massive ships shifted into position, their weapons primed. A single order from Zulfar would unleash a deadly rain of energy weapons from the sky, obliterating everything below. Humanity's last hope, the city centers, and all their resistance efforts. Nothing would survive. Meanwhile, General Marcus was facing his own dilemma. Earth's forces had held the line, but the aliens' relentless pressure was wearing them down. There was no way they could survive for long. The orbital bombardment was coming, and it was only a matter of time before the Empire's weapons turned Earth's cities into rubble. But Marcus had one last card to play, a final gamble. He had spent days analyzing the enemy's technology, poring over every detail, looking for any weakness that could turn the tide of the war. And he had found something. The Empire's shielding technology, which had once seemed impenetrable, had a critical flaw. It was a small vulnerability, hidden deep within the shields, but Marcus had learned enough to understand how to exploit it. Earth's top scientists had worked day and night to design a device that could breach the shields and disable the Empire's fleet. But the device needed to be planted directly in the heart of the alien invasion force. It was a risky mission. No one knew how much time they had before the orbital bombardment began. Marcus had no choice but to act quickly. He gathered an elite team of soldiers, each one handpicked for their bravery, skill, and unwavering commitment to the cause. They would infiltrate the heart of the Empire's fleet and plant the device, giving Earth one final shot at survival. The team moved in the dead of night, cloaked by the limited power of humanity's stealth technology. They slipped past the outer perimeter of the alien forces, unnoticed by the Empire's patrols. Marcus led the team, his mind focused on the mission ahead. But even he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were walking straight into the jaws of death. The journey to the heart of the fleet was fraught with danger. The Empire's ships, cloaked and deadly, patrolled the area with ruthless efficiency. The team had to move quickly and silently, avoiding detection at all costs. Marcus had planned every step, but no amount of preparation could eliminate the risks they faced. The closer they got to their target, the more dangerous it became. As they moved deeper into enemy territory, the tension in the air grew thicker. The team's footsteps were light, barely making a sound, but every movement felt like it might be the one that gave them away. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, could conceal a deadly threat. But they pressed on, determined to finish the mission no matter the cost. Then, as they neared the heart of the alien fleet, disaster struck. A crackling sound pierced the silence, followed by a series of rapid mechanical whirs. The team froze, realizing too late that they had been discovered. A deadly ambush of robotic AI soldiers appeared out of nowhere, their bodies shimmering as they decloaked from their own stealth mode. These machines were fast, precise, and merciless. They swarmed toward the team with incredible speed, their weapons drawn and ready to strike. Marcus immediately gave the order to fall back, but it was too late. The ambush had been perfectly timed. As the team scrambled to defend themselves, They found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. The AI soldiers were faster than they had anticipated, and their weapons tore through the air with brutal precision. It was in that moment, with the situation looking grim, that Bonner, one of Marcus's most trusted soldiers, made the ultimate sacrifice. Bonner had always been the heart of the team, brave, loyal, and willing to do whatever it took to protect his comrades. As the AI soldiers closed in on the team, Bonner saw a way to save them. He charged forward, drawing the attention of the AI robots and leading them away from the rest of the team. His actions bought Marcus and the others precious time to escape, but it came at a terrible cost. Bonner's sacrifice allowed the rest of the team to reach their objective. They planted the device deep within the heart of the enemy fleet, just as the countdown to the orbital bombardment began. But Bonner was not there to see the success of their mission. He had given his life so that others could live, and his death would never be forgotten. As the team made their way back to safety, Marcus couldn't help but feel a pang of grief. Bonner had been more than just a soldier. He had been a friend, a brother in arms. His death was a turning point for Marcus. This fight was no longer just about victory. It was personal. "We're so close, but the odds are against us," Marcus thought to himself, his heart heavy with the weight of Bonner's loss. Can we really win? The team reached the extraction point, and Earth's remaining forces prepared for the final push. The device had been planted, and now they would have to wait for the countdown to reach zero. The fate of humanity rested on this last gambit. But as Marcus looked around at his soldiers, he saw the same determination that had driven them from the beginning. Bonner's sacrifice had given them the chance to finish what they had started. The stakes were higher than ever, and the cost of failure would be catastrophic. But the team wasn't ready to give up. They would fight, not just for Earth, but for every person who had ever believed in the human spirit. "We fight until the very end," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "For Bonner, for Earth, for humanity." As the device activated, the final stage of the plan was set into motion. Earth's forces watched as the Empire's shields began to flicker, the once impenetrable defense systems now vulnerable. The countdown had begun, but the road ahead was still fraught with danger. The orbital bombardment was imminent, and time was running out. In that moment, Marcus knew that this was the ultimate gamble. Every decision, every sacrifice, had led them to this point. The odds were against them, but they had one chance, and they were going to make it count. The weight of Bonner's sacrifice pressed heavily on General Marcus's chest as he and his team advanced deeper into the heart of the Empire's command ship. Bonner had given his life so they could have a chance at survival, and now Marcus could feel the loss in every step he took. His mind raced. There was no room for grief. Not now. The mission was far from over, and Earth's future depended on the success of their final push. They couldn't afford to fail. The team's steps were swift but careful as they moved through the dark, cold corridors of the Empire's flagship. The interior was nothing like Earth's ships. Everything was sleek, angular, and high-tech. The faint hum of alien machinery filled the air, adding to the tension. Time was running out. The EMP device was almost ready for activation, but as they neared their destination, Marcus's gut twisted with unease. The closer they got to their objective, the more he felt that something wasn't right. His suspicions were confirmed when they reached the control room, the center of the Empire's power. Zalthar had anticipated their move. It wasn't just a counterattack. It was a trap. The moment they stepped into the room, the doors slammed shut behind them with a deafening clang. The lights flickered, and suddenly, robotic guards, sleek and deadly, materialized from hidden alcoves. The guards weren't just any machines. They were programmed with the latest AI technology, their combat skills honed to perfection. Every move they made was calculated, their attacks precise, and their speed unnerving. The soldiers were ready, but they had no idea what they were truly up against. The battle erupted in an instant. Marcus shouted orders, and his team sprang into action, engaging the robotic guards in a blur of motion. The soldiers fought with everything they had, quick, lethal movements honed by years of combat experience, but the robots were relentless. They were faster, stronger, and each one moved with deadly efficiency. The team's weapons fired in unison, but the AI machines seemed to predict every move, dodging with unnatural precision. The EMP device was the only thing that could disable the alien fleet, and it had to be planted at the core of the ship's control center. Marcus's heart raced as he fought off a robot that had lunged for him, its laser weapon nearly grazing his shoulder. Sweat stung his eyes, but he kept his focus. He couldn't afford to hesitate, not when humanity's survival hung in the balance. The sound of laser blasts filled the air, and the smell of burnt metal and ozone stung their noses. Marcus's team fought with everything they had, their desperation driving them forward. But even as they took down one robot after another, more appeared, as though the ship itself was alive and fighting back against the invaders. The corridors were becoming increasingly narrow, their backs pressed against the cold, metallic walls. Marcus swung his rifle and shot a robot in the head, sending sparks flying. His breath was ragged as he moved forward. They had no choice but to push through. There was no turning back now. Every second that passed brought them closer to the EMP device's activation point, but it also brought them closer to danger. They had to reach the heart of the ship, the core that housed the controls for the entire fleet. Only then would they have a chance to stop Zolfar's invasion. As they pressed on, Marcus's mind raced. He had known from the start that this mission would be dangerous. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. The closer they got to their target, the more intense the battle became. He could feel the weight of his team's hope on his shoulders. Bonner's death was still fresh in his mind, and every step forward was a reminder that they were all in this together. If they failed now, humanity would be lost. Then, as if the situation wasn't dire enough, Zolfar revealed his final trick. The command ship trembled as it activated a cloaking shield, an advanced technology that made the ship nearly invisible to all human sensors. For a moment, the ship seemed to disappear, becoming a mere blur against the backdrop of space. The once visible dreadnoughts and battle cruisers now vanished into the darkness. Marcus stood in stunned silence for a moment. His heart skipped a beat. They were running out of time. Without the ability to track the Empire's fleet, how could they disable it? Zolfar had anticipated this final move, and now they were fighting blind. They're cloaking themselves. One of Marcus's soldiers shouted over the comms. "We can't see them. How are we supposed to?" Marcus didn't let him finish. "We fight on. Get to the core. Now." The team moved even faster now, trying to reach the EMP device's activation point. But Zolfar's cloaked fleet wasn't just an obstacle. It was a death sentence. If they didn't act quickly, the hidden fleet could strike at any moment, and there would be no way to defend against it. Marcus's mind raced. There had to be something they could do. They had fought too hard to get this far. He couldn't let Zolfar's final gambit be the end of humanity. With a grim determination, Marcus turned to one of his most trusted soldiers, Lieutenant Sarah. "We can't wait for the perfect moment anymore. We take the risk. We trigger the EMP now. It's now or never." Sarah nodded without hesitation. She had seen the determination in Marcus's eyes, the same fire that had led them to this point. They had come this far, and they couldn't let fear stop them now. The team had fought through waves of robots, survived ambushes, and endured loss. They had one last shot, and they weren't about to waste it. Marcus turned back to the EMP device, his fingers trembling as he approached the control panel. His mind focused on the mission. He was so close, just one final push. He slammed his hand down on the activation button, and the device hummed to life. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a ripple of energy spread outward from the device, expanding across the control room. The cloaking shield flickered, then sputtered out completely. The Empire's fleet was no longer invisible. But they weren't out of danger yet. The moment the cloak dropped, Zolthar's ships began to react, firing upon Earth's forces with devastating power. Marcus could hear the distant rumble of explosions, feel the shockwaves reverberating through the ship. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. "We've done it," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "The fleet's exposed." Marcus didn't have time to feel relief. He grabbed his rifle and turned to face the enemy. "We fight until the very end. Get to the escape pods. We're not done yet." The final push had begun. The EMP device had worked, but the battle was far from over. The fate of humanity was now in their hands. It was a race against time, a fight to the death. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. They had taken their shot. Now they had to make sure it counted. The EMP device was now planted at the heart of the Empire's command ship, its hum a constant reminder of the final step in their mission. Marcus could feel the weight of it in his hands, every second ticking away like a countdown to humanity's future. The ship trembled around them as the countdown to activation began, but there was one problem: the cloaking device. Zolthar had hidden his flagship in plain sight, using his advanced cloaking technology to make the ship almost impossible to track or hit. Despite the seemingly hopeless odds, Marcus remained calm. His mind was sharp, even as his pulse thundered in his ears. Bonner's death had left a gaping hole in their ranks, but his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. It was Bonner's final transmission that would be their salvation. Bonner, in his final moments, had sent a signal, a last act of defiance against the Empire, a final gift to the humans fighting for survival. Marcus opened his eyes wide. The signal Bonner had sent was faint but clear, an encrypted message that had managed to cut through the chaos. Marcus knew what it meant. The signal wasn't just a farewell. It had embedded critical coordinates within it, hidden in the data stream. It was the location of Zolthar's flagship. With those coordinates, they could track the Empire's last hope. "We've got it," Marcus shouted to his team, his voice barely rising above the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing through the ship. "Bonner gave us the location. We're not blind anymore. We know where Zolthar is." The rest of the team, battered but determined, gathered around Marcus. For a moment, there was no sound but the rapid breaths of the soldiers, the tension thick in the air. They had been fighting for so long, struggling against impossible odds. And now, with Bonner's last act of courage, they had a shot at victory. But the clock was ticking. Zolthar's fleet was still invisible, cloaked from their sensors. They had mere seconds before Zolthar's ships would launch a devastating strike on Earth's remaining defenses. Marcus had to act fast. "Load the coordinates," Marcus ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. The team's tech expert, Private Jax, worked quickly, pulling up the coordinates from Bonner's transmission and locking them onto their targeting system. "I got a lock," Jax reported. "We've got the target. It's just outside the core fleet, near the flagship." Marcus nodded. They had only one shot at this. If they missed, humanity's last hope would be extinguished. The Empire's dreadnoughts were powerful, their weapons unmatched. The cloaking technology made them nearly untouchable, but with Bonner's signal, they had a chance. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His hand shook slightly as he prepared to activate the EMP. "Get ready. This is it." The EMP device was connected, and the countdown was almost over. Zolthar's cloaking device was still active, and Marcus couldn't see the enemy fleet, but he knew it was there. He knew that if they didn't hit Zolthar now, all their sacrifices would be for nothing. His mind raced, reviewing every detail of the plan, every risk they had taken, and the people who had already given their lives. Suddenly, the ship shook violently, and a deafening noise reverberated through the walls. The tension broke like a dam, and everything seemed to move in slow motion. The EMP had been triggered. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The darkness of Zolthar's cloaked fleet remained impenetrable. Then, the explosion hit, a powerful burst of energy that rippled outward from the EMP device, sending shockwaves through the command ship and beyond. The force of the blast was overwhelming, knocking several of the soldiers off their feet. The ship groaned as if in pain, and for a brief, terrifying moment, Marcus feared they had failed. But then, it happened. Zolthar's cloaking shield flickered, sputtered, and died. The once invisible fleet was now exposed, its massive ships visible against the vast expanse of space. The dreadnoughts and battle cruisers were no longer hidden in the shadows. Earth's forces could finally see them. But the Empire's response was immediate. The ships fired their weapons with precision, unleashing a volley of lasers and missiles that tore through the space around Marcus and his team. The command ship was under siege, and the rest of Zolthar's fleet wasn't far behind. But Zolthar had underestimated something crucial. In the chaos of the EMP strike, the Empire's own technology was disabled. The control systems that kept the fleet in perfect formation faltered. The enemy ships were no longer coordinated. Without their cloaking device, they were sitting ducks. "We've done it," Sarah shouted, her voice full of disbelief as she stared out at the carnage around them. "We've exposed them." Marcus's heart raced as he heard the sounds of distant explosions. His team had planted the device, and now Earth's forces were making their move. The remaining fighters launched their final offensive, attacking with everything they had. The Empire's once mighty fleet began to fall apart, as each ship was disabled one by one. Earth's forces, though outnumbered, were quick to strike, using every last resource they had. The EMP had given them the opening they needed. Marcus stood motionless for a moment, watching as the battle unfolded before him. The enemy ships were being picked off in rapid succession, but Marcus knew that this victory came at a great cost. Bonner was gone. So many others had fallen along the way. The price of this success was steep, and the losses would haunt them for years to come. But for now, humanity had won. The explosions in space continued, filling the void with the fiery remnants of what was once the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. The enemy had been shattered, their plans crumbled, and Earth's forces were in control once more. Marcus couldn't help but let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The battle was over, but the war had changed them all. They had faced an impossible foe and emerged victorious. But as he looked at the wreckage of the alien ships and the faces of his team, he knew that the true cost of victory wasn't measured in battles won. It was measured in the lives that had been lost. Sarah stepped up beside him, her face pale but determined. "It's over," she said softly, but her words were heavy. But at what cost? Marcus looked out at the battlefield. The battle had been won, but the scars of war were all around them. Humanity had survived, but the price of survival had been high. And as he stared out into the wreckage, he couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? The silence that followed the chaos was deafening, and Marcus stood there, lost in thought. The EMP strike had done its job. Zolthar's fleet had been disabled, and Earth had won. But the loss of so many, Bonner, countless soldiers, and civilians, reminded him that peace had come at a high price. He turned to his team, seeing their exhausted faces, and finally allowed himself to relax, even if just for a moment. "We've done it," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. But deep down, he knew the true cost of this victory would haunt them forever. The final battle had raged on for what felt like an eternity. The deafening roar of explosions, the blinding flashes of energy weapons, and the chaos of hand-to-hand combat had finally subsided. The vast battlefield, once a place of overwhelming power, was now a graveyard of twisted metal and broken ships. Earth's forces stood victorious. The enemy, the once mighty Galactic Empire, was crumbling, its strength shattered. Marcus stood among his team, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. Zolthar, the alien emperor, was on his knees, defeated. His once imposing figure was now a mere shadow of its former glory. His arrogance, his belief that the Empire was invincible, had led him to this moment. the powerful leader of a galactic empire, brought to his knees by a group of humans with nothing but their courage and determination. Marcus felt no joy in seeing Zolthar captured. The victory was not sweet. It was hollow. His heart ached with the loss of his comrades, especially Bonner, whose sacrifice had ensured the success of their mission. The faces of the fallen soldiers haunted him. The ones who had fought bravely, given their all, only to fall in the final moments of the battle. The price of this victory was steep, and Marcus knew that nothing would ever bring them back. Zolthar glared at Marcus, disbelief in his eyes. "How?" the Emperor growled, his voice filled with venom. "How did you, primitive humans, manage to bring down the might of the Empire?" Marcus took a deep breath, his voice steady as he faced the fallen alien leader. "You underestimated us," he said quietly. "You thought we were weak, unworthy of your attention. But we're stronger than you think. You didn't see the fire inside us. We fight for survival, for family, for freedom. And that's something you'll never understand." Zolthar's face twisted in anger. He had ruled an empire for centuries, crushing civilizations and subjugating entire species. He had never encountered a threat like humanity before. And now he was nothing more than a prisoner. His reign was over. As Zolthar was escorted away, Marcus turned his gaze to the sky, where Earth's forces were celebrating their hard-earned victory. The fleet's remaining ships, battered and damaged but still standing, lit up the darkness of space as cheers echoed from the command center. Humanity had defeated a seemingly unstoppable force. The Galactic Empire had fallen, and the galaxy was forever changed. But Marcus couldn't join in the celebrations. His heart was heavy, and his mind was elsewhere. He watched the men and women around him, their faces filled with a mix of relief, triumph, and sorrow. They had won, but at a great cost. Bonner's death still weighed heavily on him. The team had lost so much along the way: brave soldiers, skilled pilots, and countless civilians. Their blood had been spilled to ensure that humanity had a chance to survive. The destruction of the alien fleet had been a devastating blow to the Empire, but Marcus knew that this war was not truly over. This victory had come at a cost that would never be fully understood by those who hadn't fought on the front lines. The war had taken so much from them, and though the enemy was defeated, the scars would remain forever. Earth had proven itself to the universe. The once dismissed planet, ignored by most of the galactic powers, had now shown that it could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But the victory came with a bitter aftertaste. Humanity had earned its place in the stars, but the cost had been enormous. Marcus found himself walking through the remains of the command center, his footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The once bustling area was now quiet, the sounds of battle replaced by the heavy silence of loss. He passed by the shattered glass windows, where the stars beyond seemed to mock the emptiness he felt inside. The war had ended, but there was no real peace. Not yet. He entered a small room, where Sarah, Jax, and the other surviving members of his team were gathered. Their faces were weary, but there was a shared understanding between them. They had been through hell together. They had fought for their lives, for their families, for the future of Earth. And now, they had won. But the victory felt hollow. Marcus couldn't shake the images of Bonner's last moments, the look of determination on his face as he sacrificed himself to save the team. Bonner had been a friend, a brother in arms. And now he was gone, a casualty of a war that had claimed so many lives. "Marcus," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence. She looked at him with a mixture of respect and sorrow. "You did it. We did it. We defeated the Empire." Marcus nodded, his gaze distant. "Yes, but it's not enough." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "The victory is sweet, but it's not the end. The Empire is finished. But the galaxy is vast. There will be new challenges, new threats, and we'll have to face them, just like we faced this one." Sarah sighed, her expression darkening. "I know, The cost of this war has been high. We've lost so much. But we also gained something: respect. The universe will never look at Earth the same way again. Marcus looked out the window, his mind racing. Earth had won this battle, but there was no way to know what would come next. He had seen the cruelty of the Empire, the destruction they had wrought on countless worlds. And though they had won, Marcus knew that the price of this war had been too high. The war was over, but the future was uncertain. Earth had proven its strength, but in doing so, it had also painted a target on its back. The galaxy would never be the same. The Empire may have fallen, but there would be others, other forces that would seek to exploit Earth's newfound power. And Marcus knew that they would have to be ready. He turned back to his team, his face grim. "We've shown them what humanity is capable of," he said quietly. "But this is just the beginning." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're right. The Empire is gone, but there will be others. We'll have to be ready. And we will be." Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening. The future of Earth was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven that it could stand up to the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The road ahead would be difficult, but Earth's survival depended on the strength of those who had fought for it. And Marcus knew that they would fight again if they had to. As the team gathered around, their faces filled with determination, Marcus couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. The victory was theirs, but the war was far from over. And as long as they stood together, humanity would face whatever came next, ready to defend their home and prove once again that they were not to be underestimated.